it just got a lot harder to navigate the murky world of online misinformation. Fake news is now so rampant. So the question is, how do we make sure that the information we consume and share is legitimate? And might some sort of media literacy training be the answer? Well, there may be a need for it. When we look at 18 to 16-year-olds in Australia, 43% say they can't tell whether a news story is real or fake. So we caught up with some students from St Patrick's Morris College in Sydney who were recently finalists in a school newspaper competition, who are pretty cluey when it comes to fact-finding.
I don't really have a lot of access to social media, but I do get a lot of my news from sites like YouTube, even though it's not really the most reliable.
When my mum watches the news at night, I'll normally look over her shoulder and, look at what's on in TV.
I have social media, so that pops up on my feed every day. Even Google, there's always that little sidebar underneath the Google search bar. And I always find quite some interesting articles there.
There's definitely a big worry with wondering if what you're reading is true. I think people are now beginning to understand and are starting to combat, the fake news, and obviously in school, people are starting to learn how to double check your sources.
I really think it's difficult to tell fake news. I feel like that's what people get trapped in. We want to believe certain things because we want to have our opinions validated and we want to be validated ourselves. And so I feel like that's how fake news gets really consumed.
I feel like most of the time I am able to differentiate between the real news and the fake news. I do have a lot of trust in bigger news sources like ABC, 7 News, but with smaller ones that are pretty much entirely based online, I'm a tad more iffy because some of them can just seem outlandish. Just from the headline, you can be like, oh, is that even news?
Websites especially are really good now at making them look professional, and so I think it's just slightly going with your gut feeling, does this sound right? Is it too good to be true?
I always read the URLs now because you can see .com or .org or .au or .gov. That's really important to look at.
I think fake news will still always be there, but I think people will learn how to evolve and how to combat that themselves.
I lean on the side of caution because there's always going to be some fake news.
That's so good, erring on the side of caution. But clearly not everyone is quite as savvy online as they are. Saffron Howden is a journalist and a writer of the book Kid Reporter, The Secret to Breaking News. It's a handbook for kids to learn about how journalism works. But it also asks them to engage in complicated questions like, how do you tell the difference between a lie and a fact? When does statement become opinion? And is it okay to have multiple perspectives on the same event? Advice I'm sure all of us at any age could benefit from. Welcome to The Drum. We're joined by Saffron Howden in the Blue Mountains. Good to see you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, we had all the students there who were like, I just go on gut instinct, I'm just really cautious, I just look at the headline. I mean, they seem to be very canny when it came to gauging the news. How do you teach kids literacy? How do we teach them to separate fake news from real news?
Yeah, well, look, I think those kids have got it. I think we're in safe hands. I'm not as worried anymore. But if you're not those kids, I think there's a lot that we can do. And in Kid Reporter, we've got a whole section dedicated to how to be a news detective, which is basically, how to spot misinformation and disinformation. And I think it's a skill that not just kids need, but from listening to today's discussion about Facebook and all the events over the past couple of weeks, I think we all need a dose of this. So I think one of the skills that journalists have that they use every single day, which is really transferable to everyone, and in our book to kids at school, is that skeptical approach to information. So no matter what information is thrown at you, you're asking a number of questions. You're asking who produced the information. Why did they produce it? What was the motivation behind it? And why did they share it? What's its purpose? And not until you answer those questions do you do something with that information, like use it to make a decision, that's going to affect your life or to share it with others. And I think these are really critical skills that definitely need to be brought into our education system in the schools that they're not already, and that's a lot of them. They now need to be embedded because it's a life skill that I think that kids desperately need.
And you advise the approach of wearing hats. Can you explain what that is and how we can differentiate between hats?
Yeah, this is an analogy I've used for a little while now in media literacy work. So my thinking is that we're exposed to all different types of information. There's a big focus on news today, but when say you're going through your social media feed, if it's Facebook or even if you're searching something on YouTube or it's Instagram or Twitter or whatever it might be, you've got news articles, you've got entertainment, you might watch a movie, you might watch television, you've got advertisements popping up in the midst of all of that, you've got opinion. And what we advise in the book, my co-author and I, is that each time you're confronted with different information, so you pop on a different hat. So if you're looking at an advertisement, there's no problem with looking at an advertisement, but you need to be conscious that someone is trying to sell you something to get you to buy a product or service. And when you're being entertained, there might be an emotional response to that, but those aren't facts that you use to make a decision. So we approach these things with this sort of idea of different types of information need different approaches, and you have to switch your mind depending on what you're consuming.